Welcome back to another episode of The Basement. I'm your host, Wyatt. A retired teacher traveled all across Canada to find her former students and return their childhood diaries to them. Which is not creepy at all. That's a totally normal thing to do. And there was also a headline this week that read, "New First Lutheran Pastor has had many adventures." What kind of headline is that? That sounds like the title of a children's book or a Netflix documentary called The Adventures of the New First Lutheran Pastor. Speaking of Netflix, the streaming service is also planning on cracking down on password sharing. And then they're going to stop immediately after when they lose half their streams because everyone using Netflix is just sharing their account with somebody else. And nudist parks that were forced to close due to the pandemic are finally beginning to reopen. Now, they could have stayed open the entire time if they just wore masks, but I understand why they didn't. If pants were too much for you, masks are probably way too much for you. And the Jeep has unveiled its new car called the Grand Wagoneer, which is the dumbest name for a car I think I've ever heard. That sounds like something that you'd use to travel across America in the early 1800s. Not something that you'd use to go pick up your kids from soccer practice. And a Navy probe discovered the identity of a contractor that was involved in the Capitol riots. They also discovered that he was a Nazi sympathizer. Great detective work, guys. I mean, what gave it away? And a man was arrested for not wearing a mask and urinating on a flight. And everyone knows that following the new CDC guidelines, you can only urinate on a flight with a mask on. Do better. Come on now. Our movie review for this week is Pride and Prejudice, a movie for people who love English class so much that they want to use their critical thinking skills not just while reading a book, but also while watching a movie. If I'm being completely honest, I did not have high hopes going into this movie, which is a good thing because this movie was the boringest thing I think I've ever seen. The entire movie is just people sitting around and talking about nothing. And when they're not doing that, they're dancing. And you just have to watch them dance for like 5 minutes at a time. It's terrible. From what I could tell, the entire plot of the movie is just this family wants their daughters to marry into a rich family, so then the other family has more money. And for some reason, that takes over 2 hours. And the language used in this movie is also super confusing. I had no idea if everyone in the movie was being like super passive aggressive to each other or if they were being like genuinely nice. The one thing you do know for sure is that nobody likes Mr. Collins. Everybody hates this guy. He gets on screen. I don't know why he goes on screen. I don't know his purpose or anything in the movie, but he shows up and people just hate him. They just bully him for no reason. Some people try to be nice to him, but you can tell that they don't like him. And for good reason. He's super annoying. He kind of looks like a walnut. And whenever he gets on screen, you have secondhand embarrassment until he gets off of the screen. But when the movie finally ends, you realize 2 things. 1, for a movie that's not about dancing, there's a lot of dancing that goes on in this movie. And number 2, not all books should be made into movies. That way, they can't be reviewed on The Basement. Oh. This episode of The Basement was brought to you by Daylight Savings Times. Do you like doing pointless things that aren't really necessary anymore, but we refuse to keep up with the times, so we keep doing them? Well, you'll love Daylight Savings Times. With Daylight Savings, we lose 1 hour of sleep in the middle of March for like no reason, and then the next day, you and everyone you know is super cranky, making the whole experience really special. It's a great time. The entire world isn't miserable for one day. No, everything's great. I love it. Thanks for watching another episode of The Basement. I'm your host, Wyatt. And don't forget to let me know what movie you want me to review next time down in the comments. I'll see you next time.